Della Maddalena versus Islam Makhachev is such a fascinating fight, and I think it's even better than the Topuria fight for Islam. It's a bigger opponent at welterweight instead of a former featherweight. Islam's also a big guy who can make welterweight, so I like this fight a lot more. Jack has really good striking skills, he has great takedown defense, an amazing ability to scramble, he has good punching power. It's such a good fight. And if he is able to defend takedowns against Bilal Muhammad, who trains with Islam, there is something interesting there about him fighting Islam himself, right? He can get past Bilal. Can he step up another level and beat the guy who pretty much ragdolls Bilal in the training room? So JDM has to fight at another level compared to his performance against Bilal Muhammad in order to defeat the pound for pound #1 fighter in the world. And interesting enough, the betting odds are out. And Islam Makhachev is a -200 favorite, while Jack is a +170 underdog. Very interesting, as JDM is the bigger fighter, he's the welterweight champion to defend his belt, but Islam is seemingly the best fighter in the world currently. Now, we don't know how much Islam is going to weigh in there. We know when he fought Renato Moicano, he weighed 178 pounds on fight night. And when Jack fought Pete Rodriguez, he weighed 189 pounds on fight night. I can only imagine that Islam is probably going to weigh somewhere in the low to mid 180s when he's in the octagon with Jack, which is not going to be too far off from Jack's weight. I think they're going to be close in size. They're both about the same height. They both have about the same reach. Jack might be a few pounds heavier, which just goes to show you how big Islam is. Because Jack is not a big welterweight. He's just an average welterweight. Islam is a very big lightweight, and I think he will fill himself up to the welterweight division comfortably. So even though Jack is the bigger fighter, I don't think it's going to play as much of a factor as we might think it is. But will that affect Islam's cardio, going 5 rounds of Jack? Because we know Jack could go 5 rounds. This guy went through a war with Bilal Muhammad. He was tired in his first 5th round ever, but he was pressing the action, landing combinations until the very end of the fight. And he will try to do the same thing against Islam if Islam has the cardio at welterweight. He's going to be bigger, he's going to have more muscle, he's not used to fighting at that weight, and that could be an X factor in how that fight plays out. But technically, man, this is such an interesting fight because Jack has the boxing skill. He's a guy who switches stances. He's not going to stay in orthodox or southpaw the whole fight. He generally switches depending on which opening he wants. So if he mirrors the stance of his opponent, he likes to work off his jab more and put together combinations off of that. But when he takes the open stance, the opposite of his opponent, which is going to be orthodox against Islam southpaw because Islam doesn't normally switch, in that stance, Jack will throw right high kicks, straights down the center, and also counter with the lead hook. It could be interesting in how he defends a takedown, as Islam is of course going to be shooting takedowns throughout the fight. Because if Jack is in orthodox, he does give that lead leg to Islam to shoot him for a single leg. But if he's in southpaw, Islam could switch in to shoot for the single and maybe turn it into a swing single like he did against Dustin Poirier. But the timing of the two takedowns is going to be quite different. So he can shoot the same kind of takedowns. The timing will be slightly different. And that difference can be enough for Jack to dig in the underhooks, defend the takedown, sprawl on top to get away from those. But here's the thing about Islam's takedowns. He doesn't need to actually complete them, get his opponent to the ground for them to be successful for his style. Islam will shoot takedowns merely to just offset the rhythm of his opponent. He did this against Dustin Poirier, and Dustin's probably the best fight to watch. A very good striker who has good fundamentals, excellent boxer, with also good takedown defense. He's the most comparable to Jack's style that Islam has fought so far. But the only thing is, Dustin mostly likes to stay in southpaw. But when Dustin's pushing forward, and he has some good momentum and rhythm going, Islam will shoot a takedown to offset that rhythm, and then reposition both him and his opponent. Look when he shoots here. He reaches for the single leg, shifts, brings that left leg on the outside of Dustin's, which is that slightly different kind of timing there, grabs a hold of the single leg, and Dustin was able to get out of it. But Islam is pushing forward, gets into the clinch, which he does very often, and in fact, it's going to be one of the biggest things for Islam in the entire fight, the Muay Thai clinch. They throw some strikes, but importantly, once they disengage, look at where their positions are now. Look where Dustin is compared to where he was, even though the takedown quote-unquote failed. Now, Islam has the momentum. Now, Islam is pushing Dustin back, even though he didn't get him to the ground with the takedown. That is a successful maneuver for Islam by itself. And he's done this many times throughout his career. Here in the center, Dustin landed some good shots. Islam shoots another single leg again, steps on the outside of it, and Dustin defends, pushes his way out of there. And now look where their positions are. Dustin is moving away from Islam, and he's much closer to the fence. So Jack just defending the takedown is not a mission accomplished. He needs to make the follow-up from it successful, not just defending the takedown itself, because he doesn't want to be put in a worse position from defending the takedown. Now, I do think Jack actually has a better ability to do that than Dustin. I think he's better at getting the underhooks. I think he's better at scrambling out. And the interesting thing about that is Islam will give up the underhook and he gets rotated against the fence. This happens way too often in Islam's fights because he generally likes to go for the Muay Thai plum. He goes for the overhooks. This gives up the underhooks. Both Alexander Volkanovski and Dustin Poirier were successful in reversing the position on Islam with those underhooks. And Jack showed great usage of the underhooks, not only against Bilal, but in other fights as well. So he does have the opportunity to get away from the fence like that, but there's a difference fighting Islam than the others. Whenever fighters reverse him against the fence, almost always, he'll grab onto that Muay Thai clinch. He does this for multiple different reasons. Number one, he's trying to neutralize the offense of his opponent. Number two, he's creating control and getting the opponent to focus on being defensive instead of offensive, worrying about his knees and his elbows and his trips. And probably the biggest reason as to why he does this is that it allows him an escape route to get away from the fence. Islam will literally walk away from the fence while holding onto that Muay Thai clinch, walking his opponent away from it. As shown here, look how he just walks away from the fence while holding onto that position. Now, Dustin, a few moments throughout the fight, was throwing body shots from there. He adjusted throughout and didn't just allow Islam to control that position when he was pushed up against the fence. And Jack will do the exact same thing. Jack will throw heavy body shots from there, and it can be a lot more costly from Islam to hold onto that position like that. Now, Islam, of course, has a very good camp behind him, so he most likely will expect that from Jack if he ever grabs into the Muay Thai plum. That will probably be Jack's main way of attacking from there, is just ripping body shots and throwing elbows over the top, which is a very good offensive measure from Jack when Islam does that. Another thing that Jack was doing against Bilal was he was throwing the jab and then ducking after. He did this multiple times throughout that fight, giving some kind of head movement after the end of the punch to not get countered afterward, as well as meeting a counter takedown head on, which is something he can also do against Islam because Islam has a very fast counter takedown. But the thing is, Dustin did that a couple times throughout the Islam fight as well. He throws a jab and then ducks afterward, but Islam did not take advantage of it. Maybe after watching Jack's fight with Bilal, he is going to expect Jack to do the same thing. It might throw up a high kick or a knee, intercepting that head movement. Another thing about Islam is he throws that check right hook very often as a primary counter weapon. This can also be countered by JDM. He does it in all of his fights, whether he's fighting an orthodox fighter, a southpaw fighter, it doesn't matter. Islam's main reflex to when an opponent is moving forward is to step away and throw that check right hook. Now, interesting enough, Jack did throw a punch at Bilal, which is a very good weapon to use against Islam's counter hook here. And it's something similar to what Dustin tried to do. So notice here they're both in the same stance, and Dustin moves forward by faking that left hand. Islam leans away and throws a check right hook, which Dustin blocks because it's only a fake. He's able to bring it forward halfway and then retract it back to defend himself. Cocks back the right shoulder, generating momentum and power for the right shovel hook, in which he tries to intercept Islam's left head movement. Notice how Islam naturally moves his head to the left as he's throwing that check right hook. Now, it's hard to see if the punch actually lands, but this is a very good counter to the way that Islam tries to counter his opponent. Countering the counter, essentially. And look how Jack does the same thing against Bilal. He fakes the power hand, cocks back his other shoulder to generate momentum and power, and then flings that hook out there. This is a very good counter weapon against Islam's check right hook. But in other moments, Islam will bob and weave, duck and roll to throw his counter shots as well. He actually has very underrated head movement in the pocket, and he'll put together combinations if his right hook lands, as shown here against Dustin. He lands 2 check right hooks and then a left straight to end the combo. And this may be some of the best head movement Islam has ever shown throughout his career. He's leaning forward and slightly to his right, keeping his hands up. Dustin attacks with a safe jab, just throws it out there to measure and see the reaction of Islam, and Islam pulls away from it and rolls to the outside of the punch. Then he ducks inward, getting Dustin to think it was going to be a takedown. So Dustin ducks and pushes away from Islam, but Islam is throwing a right hook. Then he elbow frames, picks up that right elbow up high to defend his head entirely. I mean, there is very little surface area on that right side for Dustin to hit. So Dustin throws another jab, which repositions Islam's head movement, thinking that, okay, Dustin threw his punch, now I can roll the other way. So as Islam's moving his head to the right, Dustin intercepts with a left uppercut, but Islam continues his head movement to the right and rises up for a right hook up top while evading the right uppercut from Dustin. He pulls away from Dustin's left hand and counters with another right hook as Dustin also partially lands his. And notice how Islam is moving out to his own right while throwing that right hook, understanding that he's way too close to the fence, and he rotates his way to the center of the octagon, showing very good ring generalship. Islam says something to Dustin here, and then Dustin throws a jab forward, which Islam blocks and moves away from. Sees the loading up of the left hand. It just moves away while throwing that check right hook, keeping his left hand up. In another moment here, Islam ducks under and gets his head on the outside of Dustin's left overhand, putting weight into his right side, loading up his right hand. He rips an uppercut to the body, falls up with the left hand up top, right in front of the guard, and misses the right hook as Dustin's moving away. Dustin's throwing feints up top. Islam steps and leans away to then duck under the jab and moves in closer to grab onto the single collar, opening up a left hand over the shoulder of Dustin. Or here, Islam slips on the inside of the jab as Dustin hops his way in to line up his left hand, but didn't expect Islam to slip the way he did. So he hopped into a counter right uppercut, and Islam falls up with a right hook, leans away instinctively, and then slips on the outside of Dustin's jab to enter into the clinch. He does that very often where he slips a punch and then enters in close, grabbing onto the opponent. So as you can see, Islam can have very good head movement, a lot better than Bilal. Bilal's head movement is very one-dimensional. He just kind of leans away from punches or ducks under them. Islam will flow with combos defensively and land counter shots off of that, showing much higher skill than someone like Bilal. And it's going to be way more difficult for Jack to land his shots in this fight. But whenever Islam is the initiator, throwing his punches first, one thing Dustin was successful with was throwing his own counter jabs, which halts Islam from beginning his neutral momentum in the striking. It's hard for him to get going when the opponent is throwing counter jabs at him, waiting for him to throw first and then just countering with the jab. But the thing is, Islam can always shoot takedowns to offset that. But if Jack is throwing the jab first, Islam usually likes to just move away from it. He does that a lot more consistently than anything else. He moves away and looks for the check right hook. Islam is quite fast, so it can be difficult to line up the punches, but one answer can be a double jab into a straight. Not a definitive answer to that defense, but it can work, as Dustin did land that from the southpaw stance. But again, Islam's head movement is underrated and will pivot from the center line to get himself on the outside of the left hand. And Jack's ability to maneuver off different angles in the middle of his combination is one of the best assets that any fighter can have against Islam, because Islam does that against his opponents. Very few times does Islam fight someone who's able to hop off into different angles after they throw their own punches to line up different shots. This is definitely shown when Jack fought Bilal in the 5th round and stunned him with that one left hand. That's a combo right there that could work against Islam. Stuff like that. His footwork and angles is some of the best things he can use against Islam to not only find his own shots in the striking, but also get away from takedowns entirely. Because Islam is a very good chain wrestler, way better than Bilal. And when Jack is angling off, it takes the angle off from the takedown. So Islam will have to redirect his takedown or disengage entirely. Because if he keeps going and redirects, Jack will have an opening to intercept it. So man, this is going to be such a great fight. And as Teddy Atlas said, when a fighter becomes a champion, they get 30% better. And we've seen this many times. I mean, some will argue Bilal didn't get better, but I think he actually did in different areas. Not as a complete fighter, but his striking got like way better against Jack. He's never struck that well in his entire career. He went up against one of the best strikers in the UFC and did a lot better than we thought he would. We thought if Bilal stood up with Jack, like he could destroy. He was losing, but he held his own. It just might have been a game planning issue. And by game planning, yes, Bilal did shoot a lot of takedowns, but he shot him later in the fight, when it would have been a lot better to shoot him early in the fight. That's the game planning difference. This fight's gonna be way more difficult for Jack than when he fought Bilal, but he's definitely up for the challenge. And Craig Jones, he's gonna have a third shot at Islam to solve that grappling, because he did a very good job with Volk, but the grappling still worked against Volk. Although he did well against it, he lost an entire round in the first fight because of the grappling. I want to see how Jack does against the grappling of Islam, because if he does that well against Bilal, I want to see how he does against the next level of that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. If you guys did, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.